This week, Novara Media commissioning editor and reporter Rivka Brown was suspended from Twitter. Why? For posting a tweet that contained an email address. The email address in question was sex@novaramedia.com. It was set up for people seeking sex advice from sex expert Justin Hancock. There'll be some content coming your way on that front soon. But in case you thought this was just Twitter being prudish, it's worth noting this wasn't the first time that Rivka had been suspended. That tweet was this Wednesday, but on the previous Saturday, her account had been locked for this tweet of a selfie with this text. A normal selfie, I'll call it first day of summer uniform. Her account was locked for violating Twitter rules, as you can see there, specifically for violating our rules against posting private media of an individual from a country with a recognised right to privacy law. Now, that is a picture of Rivka, tweeted by Rivka. I don't think privacy law covers that. Rivka appealed. Twitter then rejected that, and she deleted her tweet solely to regain access to her account. The following day, she posted another selfie with this text, and it resulted in another suspension. Let's take a look at this one. So you can see there, this isn't a selfie, someone else has taken that picture. Hot leftist wedding made me post this. It's a reference to Aaron Bastani's lovely wedding in Malta. And again, they say this violates our rules against posting private media. This is someone posting a picture of themselves. Rivka appealed. Again, that was rejected, so she deleted that tweet too. On Thursday, however, she received an apology from Twitter, who said the suspension was erroneous. But which suspension? That was less clear. And having deleted her tweets, which Twitter counts as an admission of guilt, that was constantly said in the communications with Rivka, it's unclear whether this now makes her more vulnerable of being, permanently suspended in the future. It doesn't look good. Doesn't seem accountable. This isn't how a multi-billion-dollar company should treat the accounts of, remember, journalists. Now, these were selfies, but journalists can post selfies too, okay? Moving on. Today, another of my colleagues, Aaron Bastani, had his Twitter account suspended. That was for tweeting about Rivka's suspension and including a screenshot of Twitter's suspension message. Aaron, you were unsuspended a few hours later, I think, but I mean, what have Twitter said? What did they say initially to you? I mean, I know when we spoke this morning, you were worried that your Twitter account was gone for good.
There was no, please delete this tweet and we'll let you back in. There was no, you're going to be put in a timeout for something, which happens, and you can think it's disproportionate, but at least you're not locked out. It was made clear as to why my account had been suspended, and if I wanted to appeal, that was it. I couldn't actually access my account because they then locked me out of my account, and I have two-factor authentication. A nightmare. But anyway, I feel like the reason why my appeal was fast-tracked, I was allowed back on after a few hours, was simply because there were people who were sort of backing me up. Yourself, Owen Jones, a few MPs. The fact that, we've got press regulator on our side, the NUJ could go to them. I mean, there's not really a case for them to suspend me on the basis of me asking why my colleague's been suspended when they're using a Novara email account. So, I mean, it is worrying, Michael. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, the sort of the background political context. But my personal view is that with Web 2.0, with stuff like Twitter, we've only got a few years before it gets incredibly authoritarian. The idea that this is a free space where people can communicate quite easily, I think that's going.
Let's talk about that context you mentioned, because this does appear to relate to a new rule which has affected many people, multiple journalists, and it was implemented following Jack Dorsey's exit from the company. He was the founder and CEO up till a few weeks ago. Now, this new rule was ostensibly intended to protect users from harassment, and it prevents the posting of media of private individuals, so pictures of private individuals, but also private information about individuals, including contact details. However, as you've seen in these situations, it doesn't seem to work particularly well. And as Gizmodo have reported, far-right and other extremist groups have begun to use the change to the rule to get journalists and researchers suspended. Vice reported that a leading neo-Nazi posted this on Telegram. Due to the new privacy policy at Twitter, things now unexpectedly work more in our favour as we can take down Antifa doxing pages more easily. Anyone with a Twitter account should be reporting doxing posts from the following accounts to de-platform. So they're saying you can use this now. Lots of people obviously on Twitter use it to film someone who has done something racist, done something abusive, or even a cop who has behaved in an unaccountable way. The video of George Floyd being killed, that was shared on social media. If you have this automatic algorithm which just takes any image of private individuals down, so long as enough people complain, and as we're seeing here, this is organized harassment. This is organized by far-right people or other people, whoever they are on these message boards, to say what we're going to do is launch loads and loads of complaints against this tweeter who just happens to be a left-wing journalist and get them taken down. And this is a multi-billion-pound company. They can say, "Oh, sorry, this is just an algorithm problem." Well, then don't make the change until you've sorted that out.
I think it reflects their political priorities, which is they're coming under pressure in terms of, you need to moderate people's use of Twitter more. They don't want to throw big resources at it, and they don't really care too much about media freedoms. So for me, it's kind of like a perfect storm. And it's not just Twitter. If you look at, for instance, Instagram, I have a friend who has a business selling Iranian tea. It's called Persian Apothecary. They're on Instagram. She can't use Instagram ads because there is the word Persian in the name of her business. If you have the word Syria in your PayPal account, you could be Syrian. You could have been born in Syria, whatever. I don't know. You might have a business to do with, Syrian products. You might make Syrian chessboards. I have no idea. If you have Syria in your PayPal account, it won't work. We are increasingly seeing Web 2.0, these social media platforms, which have been very good in certain ways, increasingly being put along the tracks and the interests of certain political interests in certain countries, particularly in the global north. And I think if you had something like the Arab Spring now, how would it play out on Instagram and Twitter, Facebook? I think it'd be very, very different. I think it'd be very, very different. And I think fundamentally what this is about is making these spaces safe for the powerful. To an extent, of course, it's always been like that. But now it's a commercial priority for people at Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Of course, Facebook and Instagram both at Meta with Mark Zuckerberg at the top. So the pitch of Web 2.0 was this kind of cyber utopianism, this digital utopianism. We're all equal and we can share information and people can come together and create relationships that were otherwise impossible. And what that means often is actually you get quite disruptive models when it comes to politics. You have people saying things that might not necessarily suit the powerful. I'm not always saying they come from the left, by the way. They could be an ultra-nationalist, they could be a communist, they could be a separatist, whatever. But the point is, people criticizing the status quo are always going to communicate where large numbers of people are, whether that was the town square 500 years ago or it's social media today. And I think now, like I say, it's a commercial priority for people like Twitter, Instagram, and so on, for these people basically to buzz off. Look, if you want to sell a pair of Reebok shoes or some sunglasses or a pop star, great, knock yourself out. But politics, particularly if it conflicts with the status quo and their interests, no thank you. So we do need to be attuned to it. And with Novara Media, and I think with all left media, we need a strategy for where this goes. Because I do think in the next 5 to 10 years, that's the direction of travel. There will be a clamping down of freedom of expression on the internet. There will be. And we take for granted the flourishing of freedom of expression that we've seen in the last 20 years. That can be pulled. The internet has been pulled in many places, right? Whether it was briefly with Erdogan, Turkey, they tried it in Egypt in 2011 and so on. But if at any point these platforms really disrupt politics as usual, they will flick a switch. That, of course, is the doomsday scenario. In the meantime, censor voices that say things that aren't necessarily all that helpful, or at the very least, don't really prioritize their freedom of expression.